Energy Matters podcast. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I am your host Kassem Alokla from Texas A&M University Society of Petroleum Engineers Student Chapter, TAMU-SPE. The aim of this podcast is to discuss and explore some specific topics about the energy industry in general and the oil and gas in specific, while covering some related topics in environment, economics, policy, and many more. Howdy everyone, and welcome to Texas A&M University Society of Petroleum Engineers Energy Matters podcast. On today's episode, we have a special guest, Mr. David Tonner, the CEO of Diversified Well Logging, and he's going to be discussing with us a lot about the company and also his career and the view of the energy sector. Thank you, Dave, for joining us today.
Thank you, Kassem. Howdy.
So one thing that we are recording the podcast from their office in Conroe, Texas. It's really nice weather today, and hopefully the discussion is going to be a great one. All right, David, before we start our discussion, I'm going to go over your biography just to let everyone know about you. So David Tonner is the Chief Executive Officer at Diversified Well Logging, a seasoned executive with 30 years of global oil field service experience. He brings a solid technical background together with 26 years of management experience. He spent 4 years in the field working on rigs in the UK, Africa, Middle East, North and South America. He brings a solid technical background together with years of management experiences, including sales, QHSE, marketing, operations, and technology development. He is committed to ensuring that they possess the appropriate technology and the right personnel to enhance the business economics of their partners. Thank you, Dave, again. Now let's start with our questions. Maybe a little bit about your background and your education. Could you please tell us more about your education, where are you originally from, and what made you interested in the oil and gas industry?
For sure, yeah. So I'm originally from Liverpool in England,
Nice.
in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Nottingham in geoscience, and I was able to get a master's degree from Stephen F. Austin online during the pandemic.
Wow.
But my interest in geology really started in high school. I went to Liverpool College, and my geology teacher was a guy called Mr. Hamilton. Our nickname for him was Cooley. He was a little cool, but but Mr. Hamilton was also the head. We had a Royal Naval Cadet Force, and he was the head also of the Royal Naval Cadet Force. So I was involved with him both in terms of geology and also in the cadet force.
Okay.
And he had a fantastic mineral collection, but in the summers I did a lot of field trips, both with him and with the Royal Navy. I did arduous training with the Royal Marines at Lympstone in the UK. I also did several canoeing trips in the Irish Sea off the peninsula of North Wales,
Wow.
Which was really nice. And then we went on a field trip when I was about 17 to the east coast of England to Whitby Bay, where you have these Jurassic sequences full of ammonites with pyrite in them. And I just really liked being outdoors.
Okay.
I liked the mountains. I was always curious about Earth's processes. And so those are the things that really led me to think about a career in oil and gas.
Nice. And then what made you interested to pursue your career in the US? You originally started there, or you directly came here?
So I started my career with Geoservices, which is a French company out of Paris in France. And I interviewed in Aberdeen in Scotland for a job. And it was a 2-day interview process. There was some exams and different things. And then at the end, the head of HR for Geoservices, a guy called Gerard Mayon, he was telling us all about Geoservices and that they had businesses all over the world. And I was always very adventurous, and I wanted to go and explore different places, right? And so on the Friday afternoon, Gerard said, okay, the people are shortlisted, and everybody that's left in the room, you guys are going to be offered jobs.
Wow.
And we'd like you to start on Monday morning in Aberdeen in Scotland for a training class. And we're going to put you offshore in the North Sea. I said, that's great. I said, Gerard, you just showed me a whole catalog of where you guys are all over the world. Do you not have any other deployments than in the UK? And he said, well, yeah, we actually have a training class starting in Paris on Monday morning too, for our Africa Middle East division. He said, so would you like to do that instead? And I went, yes, I'd like to do that.
Wow.
So I went to Paris. We had 2 weeks working on the training, and then one of my first deployments was to Yemen.
Wow.
And so I spent almost a year in Yemen, working in the Hadramaut Valley,
Wow.
flying into Aden and then to Makalla and then into the desert, which was super nice. And this is an important story, because this is really one of the key learnings that led to our automation and RoboLogger system I'll talk about later.
For sure.
But so I go out to the rig site, right? And there are 6 people. We have a crew of 6 people. There were 2 sample catchers, there were 2 mud loggers, and there were 2 data engineers, right? And I was one of the mud loggers, right? Okay. So I had somebody catching the samples for me. I had somebody looking after all of the instrumentation. And so my only job was really to look at the rocks, right?
Okay, yes.
And I was straight out of university, so my petrology was still pretty good, fresh in my mind. And we had so much time that I was able to make thin sections at the rig site.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, cool.
And so with these thin sections, and we put them under a petrology microscope, I was able to calculate angles of hornblende and amphibole and lots of cool things. And even think about the depositional environment. I was working with the Total well site geologist, and I said, this looks like volcanic clastic deposits, which we took all the samples, we took cores, they sent them to the Institut National Français du Pétrole in Paris, the IFP. And then 8 months later, after they did all their analysis, they said, yes, you're right, that was a correct interpretation. So cool. But the point being is, because I had the time, right? My next job was with Chevron in Angola, and they were drilling unconsolidated sands, and there were only 2 people working a 12-hour shift, right? And for 28 days, all I did was just run up and down 3 flights of stairs collecting drill cuttings. And after 20 days, I'm like, did I study for a degree in geology? Like, what am I doing? I'm not helping really with the interpretation. So then I went to Canada for a year, and I worked up in the Mackenzie Delta in the Arctic Circle for ExxonMobil. They were drilling an exploration well called Tuktoyaktuk 1. And then after a brief stint in the UK, I went to Latin America.
Okay, cool.
And there, 2 very important things happened. I met my wife. and started a family.
Cool.
And but also I started a business. So I worked for a company called Datalog, and I interestingly we secured a contract with Texaco. Up in the Guajira, in the northern peninsula, offshore, in Colombia. Right?
Cool.
And I was kind of like forced into business management because the deal that I'd struck was, to my boss Ian Underdown, who worked in Calgary in Canada. I said, I think we can generate a business here. I really had ulterior motives because I just wanted to be closer to my to-be wife, right? And but what we found was we were able to win this contract with Texaco, and then I noticed that I wasn't getting paid. So I called my boss. I said, hey, this is all going good. Where's my money? And he said, oh, you need to pay yourself out of cash flow.
Wow.
And I was like, what? So, I play a lot of soccer.
Okay.
Football.
Nice.
Being from Liverpool, that's kind of
sure.
a passion of our city.
For sure.
And so I joined the local soccer team in Bogota. And, sometimes in life things just happen,
exactly,
right?
For sure.
Things are serendipitous or you work hard and you create your own luck. I'm not sure, but it's something along those lines. And so we happened to be playing soccer against a local bank.
Oh, wow.
Right? Mm-hmm. And the manager of the bank was the captain of the team that we were playing, right? So afterwards we had a barbecue and we were talking, and the bank manager, he says, how's things going? I said, pretty good. I said, but we've got this project going with Texaco. But my boss just told me I got to pay myself out of cash flow. And he goes, really? He said, come to my office on Monday morning at 9 o'clock. I can help with that.
Okay.
And so I went into his office and he said, if you've got your invoices with Texaco, just give me the invoices and I'll factor them. I'll give you the money today. He said, I'm taking 10%, but I give you the money today.
Wow, that's so cool.
So I did. And then it wasn't until, with emails and data exchange wasn't as fast as it is today. So it wasn't until another 3 months that my boss in Canada finally got his financial statements via fax and said, this seems to be going well. What's this 10%? I said, well, you told me I needed to pay myself out of cash flow. Exactly. So I did.
Wow. That's so cool.
I spent 7 years in Latin America and went to Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Argentina, Brazil, and then finally Mexico. But I started up companies in all those countries.
Wow.
And won contracts, hired on people, worked with some fantastic people down there. But anyway, I probably went off script.
No, this is really cool. This is really cool. And this will take me into the second question. With over 35 years of industry experience, you have held leadership positions in different companies, as you mentioned. You've worked with different companies in different places. For example, you also was with Nabrus, right? And then with Weatherford, you had this kind of experiences with them. So what were some of the key experiences that shaped your approach to leadership, especially now that you are the CEO of Diversified? How all of these experience helped you in order to be the CEO of Diversified?
Yep. Before I talk about Weatherford and Neighbours, the company that I mentioned just previously, Datalog, was a big part of my foundational experience.
Okay.
My boss there and the majority shareholder of Datalog, Ian Underdown, had a philosophy around failing fast, and he much preferred that people would take initiative and take ownership and make decisions, even if they were not the right ones. You wouldn't be punished for that. It was encouraged to take risks, take chances, and a lot of that is passed on to the way that I operate today. Also working with small groups and teams to start businesses in new countries. Relationships are everything, right?
Sure.
And having intimacy with the people that you work with is vital for building teams, right? And really understanding them at a personal level as well as a professional level helps you navigate. We're not robots,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Human beings,
for sure.
People, everyone has their lives and their things going on. It's really important to conduct yourself as such, so that you can really both mutually benefit and people feel good about working for the organization. Because if the people that work for you are not happy, it's impossible to provide good service.
For sure.
It's going to come out in some way or the other,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
And so people really need to feel engaged in the organization to understand the objectives and goals, understand their part, also understand how it benefits them to make sure that we meet our objectives and goals, right?
Cool.
And then, Datalog was rolled up with a company, International Logging, in 2006 through a private equity buyout, Carlisle Riverstone.
Okay.
And we rolled up several companies in that deal, and eventually it sold to Weatherford in 2008.
Okay.
And we became the second largest mud logging company in the world.
Wow.
We have 200 million. The formation evaluation side, right?
Okay.
As well as artificial lift, as well as completions, as well as rigs. There was a whole thing. But I really learned a lot about formation evaluation integration. Like, how does the rock cuttings or the core relate to the petrophysical log responses? How does it relate to the drilling operation, right? And and then going on to Neighbors. Neighbors is a great company, and working a lot on automation, rigs of the future, and I worked with some great people.
So your strategy for leadership is to make your employees take lead and take decisions that will make them feel that they are involved in the work and they have like an impact on what they are doing inside the company.
Absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right, so let's now talk about Diversified. So tell us more about Diversified. Like, how did the company start, and what's your current maybe position in the industry? What kind of services and operations you guys do, and what are the kind of clients that you work with?
Yep. So, to segue into Diversified, it's important to put a pause on what happened at Weatherford.
Okay.
So, in 2014, things changed in the oil industry. There was a big drop in oil price. Oil had been, $100-$150 a barrel, and people were spending a lot of money. Service companies were doing very well. But into 2015-16, there were large layoffs across all major service companies in the world, and Weatherford was one of those. So unfortunately, in the spring of 2016, I remember HR coming into my office at 6:30 in the morning, and I thought, I've seen this video before, and unfortunately, I was laid off.
Okay.
Right, and but necessity it's said that necessity is the mother of invention. Right, and so I had a forced sabbatical. I had a non-compete for 6 months.
Okay.
And so I was forced to sit at home to do nothing, at least in terms of the areas of work that I'd been involved in. And this is now 35 years. This is my life. This is my career, right?
So at that time you were in the US?
I was in the US.
Okay.
And so as I was sat at my kitchen table at home, I was remembering two things. One was my Chevron Angola story about running up and down 3 flights of stairs and thinking that there must be a better way to do that. And then the other thing was that Weatherford, we had run a service called Labs to Well Site very successfully, which involved deploying separate units with X-ray fluorescence, X-ray diffraction, and source rock analyzers for pyrolysis on drill cuttings. And we had separate 6-man crews, separate trailers, 3 instruments. It was expensive. It was expensive to run, and it was expensive for the operator to contract it.
Right.
So as soon as the oil price dropped, it became a nice to have, not a need to have.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And so I was thinking, with the X-ray fluorescence device, which gives elements, we can get mineralogy. So we don't need XRD at the rig site. We can validate it afterwards in the lab, but we don't need it while we're drilling. And also that we could get a model TOC without running pyrolysis, but we'd calibrate it to TOC back in the laboratory, right? Okay. So with those two things in mind, I provisionally patented a system called RoboLogger, which involved getting the rock composition directly from the drill cuttings as it was coming from the shell shaker.
Oh, that's cool.
And then so when I was at Neighbors for a short time, it was great. I got involved on the Hess rigs in North Dakota, where we were working on automated directional drilling, taking directional drillers off the rig, having the drillers do the drill offset angles so that they could make up the BHAs to make it more efficient. And that was very interesting and successful. But the past CEO at Diversified, Richard Kleiber, because this company was originally founded in 1952,
wow. Okay.
As per our logo, and has been in business for over 70 years. The Kleiber family did a very good job of creating a very good mud logging company, working both offshore on the shelf, deep water as it became more prevalent. In fact, we've actually logged more than 25% of all of the wells ever drilled in deepwater Gulf of Mexico.
Wow.
Which, considering we compete there with Schlumberger and Baker and Halliburton, for a company of our size, it's a huge feat.
For sure.
Yeah. And then it was acquired, 70% of the company was acquired by a private equity firm called Rock Hill Capital. And so when Richard, who was becoming, higher up in age, said he was ready to retire, Rock Hill went on a search for a CEO, and I interviewed for the position to become the CEO of Diversified in the winter of 2016.
Okay.
And I was able to, or had the privilege of being given that opportunity, but I also had some conditions. I said I wanted to commercialize this RoboLogger technology, as well as I thought it was really important to expand geographically to withstand some of the volatility
for sure
in the North American market. And so with those two things in agreement, I joined. But here's another little story. So the day I walked out of the offices at Neighbors in order to take the job at Diversified, I received a phone call from a very good friend of mine, a guy called John Chirico. And I'm just going to get some here. And John Chirico was part of this roll-up that we had in, and I'll show you this is in the roll-up that we had in 2006, where International Logging brought together Data Log, Discovery Logging out of West Texas, Took Rockies out of the Rockies, Johnny Took's company, and Vinny Yakubinski and John were the owners of Discovery Logging. So John gives me a call and he says, "Hey Dave, I've got a friend in West Texas, and Jay Leeper. He's got a company called Solid Automation, and they've got a product called the ARM, the Automated Remote Mud Logger."
Okay.
I was like, wow. So that's interesting. He said, and they don't want to work with another mud logging company. They want to work with Neighbors because they see that, Neighbors rigs of the future could be a great complement. I said, John, I'm in the parking. I've left Neighbors, just 10 minutes ago. I said, but I'm really interested. I said, I've patented the system, and maybe there's some coming together here, right? For sure. So myself and my chief technology officer, Aaron Swanson, we jumped on an airplane, and on Monday morning, we met with the guys, Jay Leeper, Larry January, James Martin from Solid Automation at the IHOP on I-20 in Midland, and we talked about RoboLogger, right, and their automated remote mud logging system. And we said, I said they had a sample extraction system. It was pretty cool, and I said, I think there's some things we could use here and come together. And I said, and I still believe that we could have these systems on 400 rigs. We have 15 now, but eventually I think it could be really big. But I kind of painted that picture to them, and they said, I said, so we're not just another mud logging company. We've already got some ideas that are already very much aligned with the things you're doing. So would you like to work with us? And they said, yeah. So we set up a licensing agreement, and we were able to get some of the initial deployments with that. And so I've been at Diversified for 7 years now, right? Cool. And we have been, working through this automation and developing technologies, and the devil's always in the detail. So in that same summer that I'd been laid off, when I came up with the RoboLogger idea, a good friend of mine, Hani El-Shahawi, at Shell, was the head of the Global Game Changer Group, right? And they fund and finance new technology inventions, right? So I went to Hani, and we met at the Shell campus in Houston. And I said, Hani, I got this idea. I had a deck, and I said, this is a RoboLogger system. It's going to revolutionize the status quo in mud logging. It's going to be completely different. And he said, that's a great idea. He said, Dave, like you and whose army? Like, how are you going to do this? Right. You don't have infrastructure. You don't have roof line. You don't have technicians. And I said, that's no problem, Hani. I said, you give me the money, and I'll get all that. Yeah. And he said, no. Anyway, we parted amicably, but it was in the back of my mind. Yep. So that when I joined Diversified, I went back to him. I said, okay, you said I needed an army. I have a small army now. Can you, And he said, okay, I'll sponsor. So this was in the spring of 2017. Wow. We finally received funding for that in 2019. So it still took 2 more years. 2 years. Right, for all of that to go through their stage gate processes and take some time, right? But in the meantime, we got busy building a service, which included the RoboLogger extraction system. And we coupled it with expertise in running well site X-ray fluorescence devices. Okay. 2 people I want to mention, Simon Hughes and Mary McCulley, were instrumental in helping us move that along. Simon had worked at Halliburton with their laser strack group and started much of what is well site element deployment back in 1999 in the North Sea. And I had hired Simon at Weatherford in 2009 away from Halliburton, and he'd helped us build this labs to well site service at Weatherford, right? So Simon, a kindred spirit, excellent geoscientist with a mud logging background, understands drilling operations. And Mary, who had also worked together at Weatherford and also had very good knowledge of software applications. And so they really helped us start to build a well site service, because our niche is providing data that historically is being done in the lab. Yeah. Providing it with the quality that you get in the lab, but doing it in near real time. That's why we call it surface measurement while drilling, or surface logging while drilling, right? Cool. And then we were also able to, so in 2020, and there's just sort of more stories, right? In 2020, March of 2020, what happened? COVID-19, the global pandemic, right? And I'd always wanted to further my geoscience education. I did a bachelor's degree at Nottingham, but then the window of opportunity opened up for me to do an online degree with Stephen F. Austin under the advising of Dr. Julie Blockson. And only because of the pandemic, and again, necessity is the mother of invention, and resiliency, and that's all going to come in at the end here when, we talk about advice for, younger folks getting into the industry. It's, the ability to adapt, pivot, and be resilient are really, really important things, right? For sure. And so what I wanted to do there was, when I went to university, we didn't have computers. Well, actually, there was one computer. It was a Fortran computer that was about the size of this office. and only one person knew how to program it, but most of us didn't. And so we did not have, everything was mapped by hand. We used stereoscopes for 3D images on photography. It was very interesting, but not digital, right? And so I wanted to understand and use the latest software. I wanted to use Petrel and Kingdom and Petra and ArcGIS and satellite data and, all the things, the data wrangling and how our customers consume their data. I wanted to walk in their shoes and really understand, what they were doing so that I would be able to provide a better service and understand how it fits together, right?
Evaluate the work that you are doing as well.
Yeah, and something very important came out of this because I used, obviously to my employer, I explained that my thesis was around our work. In fact, I took, 15 wells of drill cuttings from a project in the Delaware Basin where we had high-resolution XRF data and elemental capture spectroscopy logs and wireline logs and all these things. And the objective was to bring it together, right? And Dr. Blockson helped me understand things around clustering and machine learning, unsupervised machine learning, that really helped take this multivariate data set and turn it into something that was simpler to use and to understand, right?
Cool.
And that was a foundational building block later for bringing on much smarter people than I, and they have moved it on to supervised machine learning using things like discriminant function analysis so that we can give it to well construction people to make it actionable, to make decisions about picking casing points, picking coring points, geostopping, geosteering. So,
Automation was like a really important part of the work that you are doing.
Yes.
So could you please tell us more how the integration of AI and automation is really improving the decision making in the work that you guys are doing?
Yep. So the key aspects here are, we generate an elemental gamma ray from the drill cuttings by adding the uranium, the potassium, and the thorium, right? And so we compare that to the gamma ray downhole, and we're also measuring barium. So these are two very important things of the QA/QC of the data, because the first question is, are these cuttings actually coming from where they think that they're coming from?
Right.
So if I'm at 10,500 feet measured depth in a well, do I know that those rock cuttings are from 10,500 feet? Well, by comparing downhole to surface, it can give you that certainty, right? And then also the barium levels to make sure that the samples are being processed properly, that they're not contaminated,
right?
Because barium is the main ingredient of drilling mud for weight,
right?
And so if we see it, it's because it's contaminated, right? So these are two really important things. But then what we do with that are, for example, in Haynesville, where there's very high temperatures, it's a hot hole environment, right? You're often, up to 300 degrees F, and you get a lot of downhole tool failures, right? So what Southwestern were able to find is that when the gamma ray downhole fails, they can keep on drilling because they have a backup at surface. And it saves them a considerable amount of time, right? So, for example, the average trip, if you're at 4,000 feet MD, it's 2 to 3 days. And at $150,000 a day spread rate, that's up, getting up to $500,000 a trip in non-productive time.
Right.
And we've done over 50 wells. They have drilled ahead on over 17 of those wells. They've saved over 35 days of non-productive tripping time, which is over $5 million in savings. And compared to an investment of about 1.8 million.
Wow.
And they added an additional, somewhere in the region of 20,000 feet of additional pay zone at $2 an MCF of gas is an additional $17 million in annual gas production. So an overall return on investment of north of 20 million for an investment of 1.8.
Wow, amazing.
You know, if I could get that in my 401k, I'd be happy about that.
So you guys operate also in the Middle East and like North Africa, right? So in what countries specifically?
Yep. So we're working in Qatar with Qatar Energy. We have 8 rigs there. We're in Oman with Arab Petroleum. We have 2 rigs there. We have a flagship project with Aramco, with their Expec Arc R&D group, where we have integrated some proprietary nanotag technology of theirs into our system. It's called RoboTag 4, and is going very well. We're 5 wells into an 11-well program.
So with the energy industry undergoing significant transitions, especially now with all of the Energy Transition Acts and all of the companies diverting into reducing their carbon emissions, creating all of these low carbon segments within the company, how do you see Diversified Well Logging is adapting to this new industry or a new part of the industry, lowering the carbon emissions?
Yes. Reducing the emissions of carbons is critical to a sustainable future. And we're 100% behind that, right? And, you know, we're a measurements company, a surface measurements while drilling company, and we've been involved in a lot of carbon sequestration projects already. We had the privilege of logging the first offshore well, which was operated by Talos. Chevron were partners, now owned by Total. We've worked with Shell. We've done 2 projects with ConocoPhillips. We've worked up in the north in the Rockies with Tallgrass. We're about to do several projects with companies like Archaea, so, you know, the well construction process for CCS is very, very similar to the processes that we've become very good at over the last 100 years in oil and gas.
Right.
And, you know, understanding seals and seal integrity. How many baffles of defense are there? What is the storage capacity of the rock to be able to host the CO2. The CO2? These are all key questions that we help answer with real-time measurements of rock composition, gas composition, and also with post-well analysis in the laboratory that supports the lab acquisition program, right? So in the case of Conoco recently, we had full well site geological supervision of the entire G&G program. So we weren't just overseeing the mud logging portion, we were QA/QCing logging, wireline logging, the core selection points and core retrieval, fluid sampling, both for gases through isotubes, through muds and fluids from the formation, as well as the actual drill cuttings collection. Geothermal as well is going to play an important part. There's a lot of geothermal hotspots in the United States, obviously through the Rockies, but also through the Eagle Ford Trend and into the Haynesville. Offers lots of interesting opportunities there. We've also done preliminary studies on lithium extraction on brines and rocks, so that, you know, to support battery for electric vehicles. So, yeah, you know, it's the future will be a mix of energy. You know, there's 8 billion people on the planet.
For sure.
We need more energy, not less.
Right.
You know, even I saw a presentation at San Antonio at the GCAGS conference a few months back, and I don't recall the name of the speaker. It might have been somebody from Texas A&M, but can't remember. But it, you know, they were showing that a couple of hundred years ago, wood was the most important source of fuel, and of course that's been massively superseded now by coal, oil and gas, nuclear, renewables, etc. Right? But interestingly, we're still consuming more wood today than we were 200 years ago. It's just that it's become a lot smaller, relatively, because of our energy hungry need, right? You know, I use AI, I use ChatGPT a lot for different things. You know, the amount of energy that's consumed in a one ChatGPT query is significant. And, you know, we're just going to need more. That's the reality, right? And so, and it's not going to be one or the other. You know, I love what Scott Tinker at you know the BG Switch program, right? Scott's been talking about this for a long time now, but he continues to stay fresh and put up new material about the importance of, you know, energy literacy. We all need to become more educated about energy as well. So it isn't this emotive binary, you know, oh, that's just greenwashing or other off-the-cuff comments that we would really all understand.
Right.
Where does energy come from? How do we use it? You know, I want a planet that is, you know, environmentally in good shape for my children and for my grandchildren. I don't think anybody is machiavellically wanting any other different outcome, right?
For sure.
You know, but anyway, sorry.
For sure. This is really good. Since we're talking about the low carbon aspect of the industry, and I'm going to specifically talk about the Texas A&M Society of Petroleum Engineers Carbon Capture and Storage Symposium, which is happening on October 28-29. And we are very proud to have you as one of the speakers. Could you please tell us more about your experience in this conference, since you attended this conference last year?
Sure. Yeah, look, you know, the reason why we're going back is because we really liked it last time round. So congratulations
Thank
on
you.
putting together an excellent program, which is relevant and topical for the moment and very much needed. You know, I really like the way it brings together the bright and curious minds of the university together with folks in industry, and this coming together is where it's kind of like fusion in food. You know,
Exactly.
you get better outcomes when we have mixing together of ideas and thoughts, right? And we need that.
Sure.
You know, I also thought it was important that you brought together some of the folks from government and that they were able to talk about their challenges in terms of permitting.
Right.
Because that's one of the biggest challenges, I think.
For sure.
You know, the service community is ready, is from my perspective. You know, we're eager, there's equipment available, there's things we can do, and we're ready to get to work. Right, and but we need to be given permission to do that. Right, you know, Louisiana has been given primacy, but even, which is a great step, because the federal government outwardly said that they didn't have the resources to be able to process the permits, and we need thousands of permits. We don't just need tens or hundreds, right? We need many, many thousands if we're going to meet our 2030 objectives. So it's important work to do. In fact, you know, we're looking to work with the Louisiana government and, you know, helping them in moving those processes along. We've got really good geoscientists, reservoir engineers, technical people that can help with those processes, right? And make sure that it's done properly. But it's really important that we crack on, I think.
Sure.
Right?
For sure. So you mainly think that the main challenge of this industry, which is like CCUS, is the legal aspect?
I think so. You know, I mean, it's you know, rocks have proven very effective at storing fluids for hundreds of millions of years, never mind 100 years, right? So, you know, we have a lot of expertise in well construction. We can do this.
For sure.
You know, but it does need to be permitted and obviously properly, with proper surveillance, right? We need to put the technology in place as well for ongoing monitoring, time-lapse monitoring of the health and stability of the, you know, the lithosphere, the surface, and the atmosphere.
For sure.
We have to take all of those things into consideration. And those three elements, if we measure them properly, we can be good custodians of the work and pass on to the regulatory authorities and to the public so that they can trust what we're doing.
For sure. Yeah, I totally agree with that. How do you envision the integration of CCS technologies with unconventional resources? Since we are in the US and like there is a lot of interest in the unconventional, let's say, for example, the Permian Basin. So do you think like CCS can be also integrated in shale reservoirs, and how would this like revolutionize the industry?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think there's, we say shales, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a loose term.
Mm-hmm.
Geologically, most of the plays that are successful are not shales.
Right.
There has to be some porosity and permeability, and whether it's a tight siltstone or a tight sandstone or some sort of tight carbonate. This tends to be the reality of the take the Bakken, right, and the Oreo cookie with the shale up and down and the creamy bit in the middle. It's actually a dolomitic sandstone, right? So it's not a shale,
sure,
but it's called the Bakken shale.
Sure.
And so there is storage space, is the point, right? And I think people like Oxy have been, and Vicky Holub, quite visionary in bringing together and already doing enhanced oil recovery, where let's use the carbon dioxide to improve oil and gas recovery. And I think there's no reason why, in my mind, that these processes cannot be symbiotic and live together, right? I know we're wanting to, and I understand from the EPA perspective, but in reality, we can do both, I think. But nevertheless, just like in conventional reservoirs, there's no doubt, I think, that our understanding of the subsurface will guide us towards those spots which are optimal to have the seal integrity we need and to have the storage capacity with the pressure allowance, because it's not just storage. There needs to be enough low pressure so that we can actually put something in there. I think there was a lady from UT. I apologize.
Yes, BAG.
Yeah, from BAG, that was talking about that. She has a pressure problem, and I completely agree with that too.
Sure.
So.
Yep. But I think the problem that maybe the EPA is very afraid of is the hydraulic fracturing. So if you fracture the formation, the CO2 might leak or might go to places that's not supposed to be going to. But yeah, this is really exciting, and hopefully, like maybe one day, like we'll see like CCS projects in unconventional resources. So this is going to be also something that will add more value to this industry.
I also think, speaking to that, at most unconventional plays typically around 10,000 feet TVD, and just like in P&A in conventional wells, there's multiple baffles of defense geologically. It's not just one seal, all right? And we know that the average frac heights, when we look at microseismic or time-lapse geochemistry or fiber optics or other things, 100, 150 feet, right? So it's not 8,000 feet, right? And so I think there's some understanding and knowledge of our ability to, demonstrate again using technical expertise that this can be done and it can be done safely.
Right. I totally agree with that. All right. So looking ahead, as the CEO of Diversified, what are the long-term goals for the company, and how do you plan to stay at the forefront of drilling efficiency and subsurface analysis?
Yeah, good questions. I think our long-term vision is to continue pioneering in automation and providing real-time data analysis so that we can characterize the subsurface, right? These robotic systems provide a better work environment for our loggers, right? It's a little bit like driverless cars, right? It's an interesting concept, but in spite of billions of dollars of investment, we still don't have them, and what it does is it allows you to interact with what we call cobots, right? Co-working robots, in such a way, and going all the way back to my Yemen and Angola stories, right? Remember, in Yemen, the interaction was so good with the rocks because I had time to do it, right? And what humans do very well is critically think about things and put together multivariate pieces of information, disparate information that are not necessarily related, and we can find relationships, but we can also communicate that.
Right.
At the rig site, to the company man, to the driller, to the operations geologist, to modify and help the processes so that ultimately we can improve the drilling, completion, and production economics. And this applies to oil and gas. It applies to geothermal. It applies to CCS. It can apply to direct lithium extraction, to hydrogen. Thank you. You know, all those things are things that are just, there's an inevitability to that, right? We have to change, and we will, right? Sure. And you know, what I see in my job is just to make sure that we're on the forefront of that, right? And you know, by having the right technologies, having the right relationships, you know, where interaction with universities, you know, we also have some good interactions with UT, you know, and of course Texas A&M, and there's a lot of bright minds again, and I think it's coming together to produce better outcomes.
For sure. That's really exciting. Since we are talking about universities now, so as a leader in the industry, how do you envision the opportunities in the energy sector for students, let's say, who are currently pursuing degrees, let's say in petroleum engineering, in petroleum geology, in chemical engineering? So what do you think the future will hold for these guys, and what advice can you give for them and for young professionals so that you can motivate them about the future of the industry? We know that the oil and gas industry is going up and down, like it's very politics related, it's very economic related. So can you please give us some advice into this like area?
Yeah, I can try. You know, there's a great TED talk by a Swedish professor, I believe, and he talks about the importance in his family to having an electric washing machine. I don't know if you ever read it or listened to it, and we can provide the link later. But you know, he talks about how his mother was, you know, unable to spend time with them because she spent so much time. They had a large family of sons, and you know, in a rural environment, and she spent a lot of time just washing dungarees, right, jeans, and it was by hand, and then she'd have to go down to the little lake and, you know, wash them out, and then come back and wring them out and dry them out, and that plus cooking plus you know, she had no time, right? So when they got their first washing machine, you know, it just transformed things. And I think that anyway, listen to it. It's a really interesting story, and maybe I'll get some of the details wrong, but the bottom line was that the time that was freed up because she wasn't doing all this washing, she was able to read to her children and to her son, and that was what led him onto a academic career, which culminated in him being a doctor at, you know, one of the universities. And so it's, the point being is energy. You see, a barrel of oil and gas, and Art Berman says this very well, you know, produces a millijoules of energy of output, which correspond to 13 years of a person's work.
Wow. That's
to think about the energy latent capacity that it has to produce work, right? It's massive, and that's why you know, energy is fundamental to everything, right? Energy brings people out of poverty, right? It allows people to educate themselves, which allows them to bring in more money for their families, which then in turn allows them to educate and that's what most people, I think, you know, in all the things. I've worked in China, I've worked in the Middle East, I've worked in Africa, you know, I've worked in Asia Pacific. You know, 99.9% of the people on the planet, they're good people. They're just trying to, you know, do the best thing they can for their families and better their family. That's all, right? But energy helps with all of those things, right? And so we're doing ourselves a disservice when we're discouraging, and I'm talking about mainstream media, discouraging people away from our business. But in fact, we have to be smart too, right? Maybe we have to rename some of our programs, right? So instead of petroleum engineering, let's call it energy engineering, right? Instead of, petroleum geoscience, let's just call it, geoscience around energy delivery or something. I don't know, because we don't know where it's all going to go, right? But if we're open-minded, then people will be a lot more interested and attracted to careers that are focused on bringing reliable, affordable energy to households and communities, for schools, for emergency services, for hospitals, for life, right? That's what it's there for. And so we need to do a better job, I think, and I think some schools are changing their focus in order to recruit, because they found over the last 3 or 4 years they were having difficulty.
Especially in research, like the government is funding research more in the low carbon aspect, like for example CCS, like now maybe like the government is not funding a lot of projects in oil and gas, and their shift is more into the low carbon aspect. So that's why like universities are very interested into this aspect.
And, we need new people coming in. In fact, I think, my son is, Andrew has started studying geophysics and geology at Texas A&M, which I'm very happy for him. And he's in his first semester and seems to be settling in well, and gone to the football games and knows all the yells and all those things. And that's what we need, right? And I think that, in my house, and that's also a thing that just putting it out there, right? You have to have those conversations at home. I took my son and my daughter recently when Scott Tinker spoke at the Museum of Natural History in Houston. They'd never heard him before. Let's listen. Let's educate ourselves on energy literacy. My daughter's actually in Catherine, she's in public relations and marketing. But there's also a large opportunity for more assistance with getting our messaging right. We don't always get our messaging right in our business, And if we just start to focus more, we're in the energy business, we're in the delivery of reliable, affordable energy. That's the business we're in. Absolutely. It's not oil and gas. It's not, that's it. And the more we talk about that, then the more people will understand what we do, and will, see us as a friendly, very much needed service and business, rather than some, ogre or, those rich oil guys or whatever, right? Because that's kind of still some of the public perception, I think.
I totally agree. And this is really good advice, like to everyone, to get more education about the oil and gas industry, because what we are doing is really vital for the whole world, like for all of the industries to operate, they need oil and gas. And this is really a good message. Thank you so much, Dave. And I think with this we come to an end to the podcast. Thank you so much for your time today and for hosting me in your office.
Yes, sir.
It's really great pleasure, and we are very looking forward to your presentation at the Texas A&M SPE Society of Petroleum Engineers, the CCS Symposium, happening in 2 weeks from now. So thank you so much, and hopefully we'll hear more about your success and more about your leadership in the oil and gas industry.
Thank you, Kassem.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks.